I still remember the sound of the gavel. Not because it was loud, but because it ended everything. It wasn't dramatic. No raised voice, no pause for effect. Just a single motion of the judge's hand, a flat sound of wood against wood, and a sentence that lasted less than 10 seconds. 10 seconds that erased years of my life. If this story is touching you, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. At that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't react at all. I just sat there, staring at the edge of the table, trying to understand how something so calm could feel so violent. The judge didn't look cruel. He didn't look careless. He looked correct. And that was the problem. People like to believe that injustice is loud, that it announces itself with shouting, anger, obvious wrongdoing. But real injustice is often quiet, organized, documented. It happens in rooms with air conditioning, neutral colors, and polite language. It happens when everyone follows the rules, including you. I used to trust the law completely, not in an abstract way, in a personal way. I believed that if you were honest, responsible, and cooperative, the system would protect you. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't irresponsible. I didn't cut corners. I lived carefully, and I thought that careful living would be enough. My life before the courtroom was ordinary, quiet, predictable. I had plans, not big dreams, just a steady path. Then my father got sick, not suddenly, not dramatically, slowly. The kind of illness that creeps in and convinces you it's manageable, that you can adjust, that you can handle it without changing everything. I told myself I could balance both lives. I was wrong. At first, helping him felt natural. Doctor appointments, medication schedules, bills that confused him. I didn't think of it as sacrifice. I thought of it as responsibility. He was my father. There was no contract for that, no paperwork. Just obligation, the human kind. As months turned into years, my life narrowed. Work opportunities passed. Relationships faded. I stayed. Not because I was forced to, because I chose to. That choice would later be used against me. When his condition worsened, the tone around us changed. Suddenly, people wanted things documented. Doctors asked more questions. Banks requested additional verification. Words like capacity and oversight entered conversations that had once been personal. Still, I didn't panic. I thought structure meant safety. Then the professionals arrived. Caseworkers, advisors, people who introduced themselves with credentials instead of familiarity. They spoke kindly. They smiled. They asked me questions that felt harmless. How many hours did I help him each day? How did I manage his finances? Did I ever feel overwhelmed? I answered honestly. That honesty would later be labeled emotional involvement. Someone suggested a review, just a review. They said it was standard, routine, a way to make sure everything was being handled appropriately. I agreed because I had nothing to hide. Because I believed transparency was protection. The legal process didn't start with conflict, it started with forms. Forms that looked harmless, assessments that sounded neutral. But every form reduced my role into categories. Caregiver, relative, interested party. Never the person who knew him best. The guardian was introduced as a safeguard. Someone objective, someone trained, someone who could make decisions without emotional bias. They said that like it was a compliment, as if love were a liability. I wasn't accused of wrongdoing. That's important. No one said I was abusive. No one said I was negligent. They simply said someone else could do it more efficiently. Efficiency became the argument, and efficiency doesn't measure loyalty. The hearing was brief, shorter than I expected. There was no space for stories, no room for context, just evidence, medical opinions, professional recommendations, documents that described my father as a case, not a person. I tried to speak, not to argue the law, but to explain him, his habits, his fears. The things that calmed him when confusion took over. The judge listened politely, then redirected the conversation back to procedure. That was the moment I realized something terrible. This wasn't about understanding, it was about compliance. When the decision came, it sounded reasonable, measured, balanced. The guardian would assume full authority. It was, in the judge's words, the most appropriate course of action given the evidence. No one objected, because no one could. I should have been angry. But anger requires a target, and there was none. The law had spoken clearly, and it was right. After the ruling, everything changed in small ways at first, subtle ways. I couldn't approve medical decisions anymore. I had to request information instead of receiving it. My role shifted without ceremony. From caretaker to observer, the guardian followed the rules, every rule. Schedules were precise, decisions were documented, but something was missing, recognition. They didn't know the look on my father's face when he was frightened. They didn't know which songs calmed him. They knew protocols, not people. Visiting became regulated. Time slots, approvals. I had to justify my presence in a life I had sustained for years, and every request reminded me of my new status. Peripheral. My father noticed the change. He asked questions. Why do they decide now? Why do you ask permission? I didn't know how to answer. How do you explain legality to someone who measures life emotionally? He declined faster after that. Maybe it was the illness, maybe it was age, or maybe it was the loss of familiarity, the loss of control. The quiet understanding that trust had been outsourced, I tried to challenge the decision. That's when I learned how expensive justice can be. Appeals require resources, money, time, energy. I had already spent all three. The system allows appeals, it just doesn't make them accessible. Friends told me to accept it, to be grateful. At least he's being looked after. They meant well. But they didn't see what I saw, the confusion, the isolation. The way my father looked at me, searching for authority I no longer had. When he passed away, everything was handled efficiently. Notifications sent, documents processed. I was informed, not involved. I attended his funeral as a relative, not as the person who had carried the weight of his life for years. Afterward, the paperwork concluded, cleanly, accounts settled, files closed. The system moved on. I didn't. That's when the truth settled in. The judge had been right. Every step was legal. Every safeguard worked as designed. And yet the outcome felt brutal. There was no villain, no corruption, no scandal. Just a system that prioritizes distance over devotion, neutrality over love. People ask me now if I would do it differently. If I regret trusting the law, I don't know how to answer. Because trusting the law felt like the right thing to do. And it just wasn't fair. That's the lesson no one prepares you for. The law doesn't exist to protect attachment. It exists to manage risk. And sometimes love is considered a risk. I don't blame the judge. I don't blame the guardian. They did their jobs. That's what makes it unbearable. I replay that moment in court often. Not the ruling, the silence afterward. The realization that something human had been reduced to procedure. That my role in someone's life had been reclassified by paperwork. When people say, the system works, I pause. Because sometimes it does. And sometimes that's exactly the problem. The judge was right, and it ruined my life. If you think stories like this should be told, you can support the channel by liking this video. If you want to keep watching, subscribe to the channel. A new episode every day. Cool doesn't always mean fair.